Are you ready to do this?
All right, yeah, I'm ready. I'm freaking ready, dude. I'm pumped.
Sick.
Hello, and welcome to the very first ever Interstate Gamers podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, aka Slugs.
I am Peter, aka Deal For Real, and I am also your host.
On this podcast, we will discuss and critique some of our favorite video games, and some of our not so favorite as well. We hope that it'll help us think critically about video games and help us discover why we love the games that we love and what we like and don't like about certain aspects of different games. So without further ado, let's get started.
I was curious if you are sipping on a sort of alcoholic beverage right now. I know that is something you like to do when you're about to sit back and record a cast, so...
I do frequent my my brews. You do know I do like my brews. So I like my brews and my bros. So I am drinking this fine Shiner Wicked Ram IPA. And actually, I have a little bit of a story behind this beer, if we can get into that for a little bit.
Sure.
So I don't know how global Kroger is. I assume it's pretty global. But I was at Kroger the other day, grocery store, and, I thought, okay, I need to get a beer for this week's podcast. And I just want a good 6-pack. So I picked out a Shiner variety pack. Now I walk up to the counter with this 6-pack in hand, and it has one of those little cardboard holders for the beer.
Yeah.
And so I place it on the little runway they have for like groceries. Or I should say that
where the groceries take off into your plastic bags.
Yeah. So they take off. They take off to the cashier, and the cashier just has to
launch them.
It's like she's like a pit crew. She's like changing tires and whatnot.
Right.
But I was about to place it on this runway. Good terminology for that. And right before I do, the cardboard container just gives way because apparently it was pretty damp from, I guess, I know people don't like this word, but moistness of the beer. And so all this beer falls out, and I'm like, oh, great. And I have a bunch of people behind me. And the lady at the cashier was like, oh, no. And the guy that was the bagger, he was like, here, you can go get another one so you can replace it. So I go and get another 6-pack, same 6-pack. And I brought it up to the counter, and I check out with all my food and my beer. So my total was somewhere around $30. I didn't spend too much. And I was getting ready to leave after we had bagged all my groceries. And the cashier lady was like, wait, don't you want your beer? And I'm like, no, I clearly have my 6-pack right here. And she's like, no, the one that you dropped earlier. I was like, well, no, I don't, because I dropped it. And she was like, oh, well, I charged you for it. And I was like, you did? And she was like, yeah, I thought you wanted it. And so what I'm thinking in my mind is, I'm like, what? I mean, she thought I wanted a second 6-pack. But my thing is why did she think I wanted a second 6-pack?
Because you clearly went back to get another one after you dropped the first one, right?
Right.
Oh.
Right. So did she think I was inspired by dropping that 6-pack to go and get another 6-pack? So I was like,
the 6-pack,
no.
The 6-pack drops, and the sound of it impacting the floor triggers a light bulb in your mind. You're like, oh shit, you know what? If I had another one, I could drop 2 of these.
Yeah, for real. So I'm like, okay, well, no. And she's like, okay, well, there's only 3 in this bag as well, because she put it in a bag because the cardboard broke. And I'm like, okay, well, that's obviously not another 6-pack, which I apparently paid for. And she's like, yeah, well, you could get your refund, which you can't do in this line because the line's too long. So you have to go to customer service, or you could just go pick out 3 beers and just, call it a day. I was like, let's just call it a day. I don't want to deal with customer service. It's already too complicated. Yeah. So that is my beer story. It was a very frustrating experience, but I was so bewildered by the fact that this lady thought that I was inspired by dropping that first 6-pack that I should want. So effectively now I've got 2 6-packs of Shiners. So I've got 12 Shiner beers. I'm just like, oh, okay. Anybody want some Shiner?
I bet she went home and recorded her podcast about movie reviews. And she said,
Yeah.
this weird ass dude, he dropped a 6-pack and then pretended that he wasn't inspired by it so he could get another 6-pack for free. Like, what the hell?
You weren't inspired by dropping your own 6-pack? Anyway, what beer you got, man? What brewski you got going on?
I have to admit, I don't have like the greatest story behind it. I got it for free because my roommate got it for free and he let me have it. And I will be bringing home my own free beer tomorrow to exchange for this one. But this is from a brewery in Utah, I believe. Yep, from Salt Lake City, called Uinta, spelled Uinta. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But it is a pumpkin ale, and it is called the Punkin, as in PUNK''N.
That's awesome.
Pumpkin ale. And it is ale brewed with pumpkin and spices. I will say, I've had a couple pumpkin beers this season, not too many. But this one, it's fairly mild. It's not overwhelmingly of pumpkin, nor is it overwhelmingly of spices. So it's kind of subtle, kind of nice. Feels good on my tongue and such. But I look forward to sipping on it throughout our podcast, which, by the way, should we get to the meat and potatoes of our podcast?
Let's get to those potatoes.
Now that we've talked about beer for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to talk about what we're talking about?
Sure. So the first game we'll be reviewing on Interstate Gamers, well, our inaugural game, in fact, is a Nintendo 64 classic that, if you're a listener of ours and you have played any sort of video game in the last 20 years, you're probably familiar with this franchise. It is Mario Kart 64.
The classic of classics.
For the Nintendo 64, of course. Some quick facts for you. Mario Kart 64 was released in February of 1997 in North America. Whereas the N64 in North America debuted in September of 96. So this is a fairly early title for the N64. It came out about 5 months after the debut of the system. So it's an early foray into 3D karting. And this is a game that a lot of people, of course, grew up with or have played, in college. I think it's a pretty common college dorm room staple. If not Mario Kart 64, then other ones in the series.
Right. I know I've played my fair share.
Yeah. And of course, Mario Kart 8 is really popular and has been for a long time. I think it's still popular. I don't keep up too much on the current trends. So.
Oh, they just came out with Deluxe, so yeah. I would say it's popular enough for them to re-release the game on the Switch. But yeah, you're right. So let's break down what we're trying to do here really quick. How these segments are going to kind of go. So we have essentially what I like to call 3 categories. Categories of gameplay, aesthetics, and content. But aesthetics can kind of be broken up into 2 categories, which is basically how I like to rate it, into visuals and audio. And I take those 2, average them for aesthetics. And so then I average all the other 3 categories, or the 3 categories, gameplay, aesthetics, and content, to get the overall score. And then I compare it to other scores that we have done on this podcast.
Right. And I'll be doing the same thing as well. You and I will have slightly different numbers that we rate by, which is fine. And we'll, I guess, address that when we need to. But I do want to elaborate a little bit on the last category, which is content, because it's a slightly ambiguous name. And I just want to clear it up in this first episode. And then later on, it might be more clear what it is the more episodes that we do.
Right.
But the content category is essentially the catch-all category for stuff that doesn't really fit into the gameplay or aesthetics categories. And so what content can be, it can be the literal content of the game, like how much of the game is there to play, like if it's a game that has like a single player campaign sort of thing, is it a good enough length? Does the length suit the type of game that it is? Is it a game that has a lot of unlockables? Is it a game that needs a lot of unlockables? Is there customization? If it's a game with a lot of story, is the story actually good? So that stuff that can get sort of nebulous and that wouldn't really fit into other categories, we put into the content category, which I think is pretty valuable. And we'll get into that along with the other categories real soon here as we talk about Mario Kart 64.
Right. So let's get into it. Let's start with gameplay. I suppose that I will give my thoughts and views and ratings on gameplay, and then you can follow up with yours. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's first talk about some of the things about the gameplay of Mario Kart 8. I played it yesterday at my good friend Ryan's house. Had a lot of fun revisiting the game and just kind of remembering how the game worked and how it played and everything. I was just like, man. And I can't say that it aged super well for me.
Wait, just real quick. You said that you played Mario Kart 8 at Ryan's.
Oh.
Did you mean 64?
I meant 64, my bad.
You were off by a factor of 8.
Yeah, those computer programmers, we get our 8s and 64s, 64 bits. But so I was playing it at his house, and it was just really interesting revisiting some of those things. Obviously, most people know that rubber banding is a huge issue with Mario Kart. It's actually pretty ridiculous. So if you were to hit someone with, say, a green shell, and let's say I'm in first, I would hit someone with a green shell, and like 10 seconds later, they've already caught back up to me. And I'm like, well, wait a minute now. It's like, if I were to get hit by a green shell, it would take at least 3 times as long. It's a quick Zoolander reference for you guys. But
just to clarify real quick on what rubber banding is, because not everyone might know. But the term rubber banding refers to when a computer opponent in a racing game basically artificially speeds up to catch up to you if you're ahead of them.
Right. So that a lot of that happened. But I noticed that when I got behind myself, I was also rubber banded, quickly to the top. But it made it difficult. So, like, if I were to get hit at the end of the game, or at the end of the race, I should say, they would easily, pass me, and I would lose all my progress, even if I had lapped, or I had led, 2 or 3 laps. They were never that far behind me. So it's like, okay, well, I've been doing good laps and stuff like that. I also thought that some items were pretty funky, like the red shell. When you shoot it, it goes off to either the left or the right, and frequently it would hit a wall to where it makes it almost ineffective. You have to place it super well to launch your red shells.
Yeah, what happens with that? I noticed that yesterday too. Re-noticed it because it's always been kind of a big problem with Mario Kart 64. But what it does is it travels ahead of you for maybe not a full second, but it kind of feels like it. And it travels straight ahead in whatever direction you were facing when you shot it for, let's say, 3/4 of a second, and then it homes in on the enemy. So you have to take that into account if you're, near a wall, as you said, or if you're drifting around a corner and you're facing into the corner, there's a high likelihood that your shell is going to hit that corner if you're not being careful because of this delay thing that it does. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it's something that I did not write down in my notes. Shame on me, but it is something you have to get used to. And it is a little funky. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and there's also a little glitch that I have Ryan as my witness, that when I had a red shell, I shot it and it turned green for 3 seconds and then turned back to red. And I was like, wow, I don't know what that's about.
I have never noticed that. Holy shit.
It was on it was on, what level was it? Let me Sherbet Land. Sherbet. I don't know how you say that. But so that was really weird. But I want to say, with all this, I feel like I've been bringing a lot of negativity to the gameplay. There are some cool aspects, and I want to say battle mode is amazing. I love battle mode, and I can't get enough of it. That was one of the things I played a lot as a wee lad.
Yeah.
And I also really liked Grand Prix are really fun. They make it there's a lot of energy with it. I don't know why. It just seemed I got really excited about Grand Prix and winning. It's definitely a lot more fun when you have your friends in there, but I thought that was pretty fun. And then some of the other things that I would like to point out, it's really odd that they included this, but you can't continue in the Grand Prix unless you get 4th or better, which is, I find a very odd mechanic.
And I kind of wonder what they were trying to get at with that. If they're kind of forcing you to earn the right to continue, you have to prove yourself able almost, which, I mean, maybe it makes a little more sense that it's old Nintendo that did that, because old Nintendo was more known for, having difficult games. And I can't really speak to whether newer Mario Karts do this or not because I haven't played a modern Mario Kart in a while, or actually any Mario Kart for that matter, other than to review this game. But I don't remember that really happening except for maybe in Super Mario Kart. So it is weird that Mario Kart 64 does force you to do relatively well to continue.
Right.
I remember getting pretty frustrated by that when I was younger. I think I had trouble on Toad's Turnpike, the highway level, as a kid, and I remember distinctly like failing that several times as a wee lad, as you said, and having that like stupid screen come up. It's like shit. I have to. Well, I didn't say shit when I was a kid, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, it helps you in the fact, okay, say I want to win a Grand Prix and I know I need to beat a certain person. If I didn't beat said person, I could stop at the very end of the finish line, get fifth, and redo the race to still be able to beat him. However, devil's advocate, if you just want to get the Grand Prix over with, you're just having a miserable time, but you don't want to lose all of your progress, you have to get fourth. Like, let's say it's a course that you hate or you're just not good at it. You just kind of have to power through it. I had several attempts on Banshee Boardwalk, and yeah, that was pretty frustrating. But lastly, the only thing that I find really odd as well, and I guess this had to do with issues with RAM, but especially so early on in like 64's development, but you can't do a Grand Prix or anything like that with more than 2 players, and you can't have CPUs with you. So I thought that was a little odd, but those are my gameplay critiques.
Yeah, and those are all critiques that I pretty much agree with.
Okay, so that kind of gives me an overall rating for the gameplay at 83. Solid 83.
Not a bad rating. I guess I'll take my turn now. I do have a couple of things that are unique to my notes, it seems, so I'm glad that I get to mention them. I want to say one really good thing about this game, and that is that you get a really great sense of speed, at least on the higher CC difficulties.
Yeah.
What's that stand for? Cubic centimeters? Is that what it is?
Oh boy,
I don't know much about go-karts. I think it's cubic centimeters. But at the higher difficulty ratings where your engine is more powerful, or so they say, you just get this fantastic sense of speed. And I was even playing with different characters. Like my go-to is Yoshi, who is a pretty nimble guy, right? But I played with Luigi, I played with Bowser, and all of them on that 150cc difficulty rating, they all felt pretty speedy. Like I felt like I was going real fast and had to work for my wins, you know?
Yeah.
Which was really satisfying. I think that some of the newer Mario Karts I've played, and again, I haven't played Mario Kart 8 really, so that'll be like my disclaimer throughout this whole thing. I feel like the other Mario Karts I've played, they don't really do that so well, like even on the highest ratings.
Oh, yeah.
And again, for the last time, I'll say, I believe that Mario Kart 8 has like a 200cc rating, which apparently is really fast and really difficult, so I'll...
Super difficult.
Okay, so I'll give that to Nintendo. But in the other games I've played, like Double Dash and Mario Kart DS, which are the 2 other Mario Kart games I've played a lot, they never quite give you that visceral sense of going real fucking fast that this game can.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I did get that sense as well. And I will say that I've played 8 pretty extensively, and I will also say that 8's probably my favorite, disclaimer. But they both do give you a sense of speed with the differences. So 50, 100, 150, and then if you're going to Mario Kart 8, 200, it's definitely noticeable. But I have not played much of the other ones to really remember. But it's kind of cool that we have different experiences with different Mario Kart games to be able to bring that feedback.
Yeah. We get to kind of fill in each other's gaps a little bit.
Yeah. Also, did you notice that? Did you notice that Bowser is kind of OP in battle mode? Like, you could just wreck people. Like, he just runs into you and kind of makes you lose your balloons.
What's funny is that I have the official player's guide for this game. I don't have it with me here in Colorado, but I do remember distinctly in the battle mode section, they do say, hey, pick Bowser or Wario or DK, because you can literally just ram people. And I was like, oh, that would be the only time I would ever pick any of those characters, because I always don't pick heavyweight characters in recent games. But yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that.
Now, can I ask you this? Because I don't really know for sure. Is there any differences in terms of speed with each character since you have the game guide?
So there are, or at least there should be, and the game guide definitely tells you so. And granted, I didn't play the game very much last night. I played it for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And also, I was playing on 150cc the whole time. But I felt that all of them were pretty fast. Like, I played with, I believe it was Yoshi, Luigi, and Bowser in that order. Maybe the order of going quickest to least quick might have made any differences less noticeable than if I had done it, like, out of order.
Right.
But they all felt pretty good to control and pretty fast. So I would need to play the game more to be able to like answer that from my own experience. But like common sense dictates that they should be different.
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure they always have been.
Right. Okay, so what is your gameplay score for this game?
Well, I'll tell you when I've gone through my other points, Kevin.
Oh, my bad.
Because I'm
I'm getting a little ahead of myself here.
Yeah. We do have a lot to cover.
We
but
do.
I just have a couple more little points I wanted to mention. One of them was about the controls. Are not the controls plural, but rather the general control of the cart. One thing I noticed is that when you turn, not drifting, but just regular turning, it's kind of hard to describe this, but I feel like it's kind of slippery in that, let's say you're going straight and you make a right turn, you'll kind of like drift over to the left just a little bit before you make that right turn.
Right.
And vice versa if you're turning the other way. And that's something that I found myself like kind of fighting against as I was driving. Like I was telling myself, okay, I need to compensate for the fact that my car is going to be a little bit slippery, for lack of a better term, and I need to, control for that, which actually was kind of a fun challenge once I remembered that it was part of the game.
Right.
But for someone who is coming from a different Mario Kart game, it might not be all that welcoming.
Right.
And so that's something where it is kind of a fun little challenge if you can look at it with that perspective. But if I had my way, I would rather it not do that. I'd rather it just say, okay, if you're going to turn to the right, then you just turn to the right,
Right. Left.
And so I'm kind of wondering, I don't have much experience with real go-karts, but I'm wondering if like that is in any way reflective of like a real go-kart characteristic, or if it's kind of a quirk, or if it's like some non-realistic design choice that they made anyway. I'm not really sure, but it is interesting.
I've ridden in a few go-karts in my time, and they are kind of slippery to an extent, but I would say that most of the go-karts I've ridden in, it was just to ram other people. So
So maybe you weren't so concerned about like finesse and
no, I was like, all right, I'm hitting this person. Like,
I'm going to finesse my way into that vehicle right there.
finessing. Yes. I like that word.
So I do have one more topic,
Okay.
and that is that this is a plus for me. It might not be a plus for everyone, but I really like the fact that Mario Kart 64 does not have coins on the track. I know that Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo, aka Super Mario Kart, I know that has coins on the track where as you collect coins, your top speed increases up to a certain point. I know that Mario Kart Super Circuit for the Game Boy Advance also did that. That's a really great game, by the way. I don't know if too many people have played it. Mario Kart 8, I believe, also has coins. Can you confirm or deny that?
It definitely does, yeah.
And I've never, and again, this is a personal thing, I think, but I've never really liked coins in Mario Kart games. I feel like the game kind of is telling me where to drive when there are coins in the track that like I need to get, or else I'm not driving optimally, basically. Because I'm decent at Mario Kart. I already know I'm getting there on the perfect line. I don't need coins on the track to tell me where to go.
Oh boy.
So the fact that Mario Kart 64, Mario Kart DS, they do away with that, and I think it's better for it because I can take whatever line I want.
Oh boy.
And feel like I'm not missing out on some stupid incentive.
Right.
That's the P. Willie hot take on coins.
The P. Willie hot take. Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you now that you mention it and I'm thinking about it. It's like you have more freedom without the coins, and it's more like you against the other racers than, oh, I need to get these coins so I can go faster. Like, I kind of agree with that. It's like, okay, I have to go this way so that I can get more coins so that I can be faster. Like, While it does add a little bit more challenge and difficulty to the game, I kind of do like the raw aspect of no coins. So I kind of agree with you on that.
Yeah. I feel like the coins might have originated as them trying to shoehorn coins into Mario Kart because they knew it's the thing that Mario does, right? And I'm kind of interested to hear what other people would think about this. I don't know if it's something that's been mentioned in like reviews of Mario Kart games. I haven't really read too many of those, if any at all. But I am pretty interested to see what side of the debate I'm on, you know?
Yes. Okay.
So that does it for my gameplay analysis. And having said all that and having discussed with you the points that we've discussed, I'm going to give it a hot 4 out of 5 on gameplay.
Ooh, that's hot.
AKA an 80, which actually sounds pretty low when I say it out loud, but it's 4 out of 5, which sounds accurate to me. I would say if the controls were a little more tight with that, you know, the thing that I mentioned about slipperiness, a little more tight, and if the rubber banding were maybe toned down a little bit, I think I would have given the gameplay just that extra nudge needed to get to a 5 out of 5 for me personally. But still, I'd say 4 out of 5 is really good. It's a really fun game to play. I think it's satisfying. You go fast, as we discussed. It's a great time. You go fast. You know, you have to go fast. You got to go fast.
Okay.
So yeah, sounds like you and I are pretty much in agreement then. You said, what, 83, I think?
Yeah. I was about to mention that. I was like, we're pretty similar in those aspects. Yeah, I would say 83. I would say it's not bad. It's not great. 83 is still a pretty good score in my opinion, but I'm hoping one of these days we can get a score of 69. Like just average out like a total of 69, overall 69. Now that's a bad game, but if it gets a 69, I don't know. It might just be the game.
It might.
Anyway, moving on to aesthetics. I think, you know, since this is like your favorite part, I believe, of games, why don't you start with your aesthetics if you'd like to?
Well, I'll say it's not my favorite part, but it might be the part that I know the most about on a professional level. So I kind of see what you're getting at.
Right.
So in my notes in my little personal scoring system, I do break it down into visuals and audio, but you know, it all kind of comes out in the wash as you were discussing. It's part of the whole. So I'll just give you my quick takes on this. I'm going to start with the audio because the audio, it's really simple for me to evaluate. And by that, I mean, it's fucking fantastic. I think Mario Kart 64, like every Mario Kart game and like pretty much every Mario game in general, it has a great soundtrack. The songs are all really, really catchy. They're instrumented, are arranged very well. Of course, Mario Kart does that thing where the music speeds up on the final lap, which can be annoying, but is really it's really a staple by this point. I do have a minor complaint about the sounds, and that is that some of the karts have pretty annoying engine noises. Like Yoshi, for instance, he has kind of a wah that is just going on the entire time, especially, you know, like when you're on a tear and you're not slowing down very much. That can get pretty annoying.
I like that sound effect.
Wah. There's some great voice clips in this game, like whenever Toad gets hit and he goes like, "Oh, whoa, 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 whoa," and just random things like that. It's just there's so much memorable audio in this game, and I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5 in that regard.
Can I insert a little comment here? One time when I was crossing Ryan challenged me to do mirror mode on the Toad's Turnpike. I think that's what it is.
Oh, hell yeah. That's my jam.
So we were doing that, and ironically enough, Toad, we're going across the next lap, and I hear him get hit behind me, and I just hear him go, "Wah!" And it like fades into the distance. I'm like, I love Toad's voices in this game. Like when he gets like the golden mushroom, it's like, here we go. That's so great. Oh, I love it.
I think when he wins, like if you're playing a multiplayer game with Toad and he wins, he goes like, "I'm the best," or something. It's just
yeah.
Toad is great. I think that honest to God, Toad in this game is a meme. Like I think if you go on knowyourmeme.com, I'm pretty sure there's a page about Toad in Mario Kart 64.
I would be willing to bet that is a meme as well.
So do you want me to continue on to my thoughts on the visuals, or do you want to sort of...
Well, let me just say that I tend to agree with you. I think all the songs are catchy and easily to get hooked on, and you can hum along with them. And it's like, I have not played this game for years, and I went back to the game, and I could instantly hum or whistle or sing the tunes. Like, it's that catchy. So I kind of tend to agree with you. I'm just going to go ahead and give my score because I don't think I need to say anything more on the matter. For audio itself, I gave it a 90. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to visuals then. I don't think that this game is especially pretty, but I'm keeping in mind that this is an early N64 game,
Mm-hmm.
and 3D games in general were pretty new at the time.
Right.
A lot of testing the waters, and so I'm kind of being maybe a little more lenient on the visuals than I would with like a later N64 game. I do think that it's pretty odd, but also cool how they rendered all the characters as 2D sprites driving around in that 3D environment. And this is something that you and I discussed a little bit earlier when we weren't recording. But I do think it's pretty neat how like the 2D sprites respond to whatever direction the camera is looking at them. And I believe you were talking a little bit actually about how you have some experience with this when you were producing a video game of your own, although on the computer.
Yeah, the infamous name of Squirrel Hurler. And it's not what you think. It sounds like, the squirrel is like puking on things, but for some reason our one of our developers thought it would be like he was like hardcore on this, like, no, it has to be called Squirrel Hurler. That's the perfect name. And he would spell it. He would spell squirrel like SKWERL, so it would be like squirrel. But that aside, I did do some development on that game in Unity for a iOS mobile app for a platformer. And we did use 2D sprites in a 3D environment, which I think is similar to how Mario Kart 8, or not 8, 64, I did it again. And I think that's similar how that operates, in that it has a 3D hitbox, but the sprite is 2D. So from the camera's perspective, it looks like it's in 3D, but it's actually not. It's just a 2D sprite. And so it's just kind of weird in that aspect because it's literally 2D, but it's almost as if it is in 3D because it hits objects like it's in 3D. So it's really trippy. But essentially, that 2D sprite is in the middle of that hitbox, and it will turn with the camera as the camera rotates and moves. So you have a script that basically ties the 2D sprite to the camera. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, I should say the other way around. It's the camera tied to the sprite, because the sprite can move off in a different way. Anyway.
Enough about that.
Yeah.
Enough about sprites. I don't drink soda. I don't care. I'm trying to move on. Just kidding.
Sprite remix.
I was actually really glad to hear your input on that because it is something that I didn't really notice when I was younger playing this game. Like I remember at some point, like well into playing the game, I was taking a closer look and I was like, oh man, like these aren't 3D things. And I wasn't thinking about it in technical terms back then, but it is kind of a little dissonant, I suppose, when you do notice it. And I feel like it's something that it's impossible to unsee. It kind of breaks the illusion a little bit. But, I'm sure that they did it for technical reasons. Like, I'm sure they had limitations, kind of like you mentioned, with only being able to play the Grand Prix with 2 people, not 3 or 4. I'm sure they, couldn't render so many 3D objects refreshing at whatever rates, like I'm sure that there were some issues there. But I do think it's a good, if weird, solution. And it's not something that I think really detracts from the game, but it is a little distracting when if you let yourself focus on it too much.
I would like to add to something with that. One thing I found annoying about it is that it kind of threw off my depth perception when I got close to an item, per se. It's like I'd be ready to slightly turn to hit the object, but like when I would turn, my sprite would change, and it's like a little bit off because they're rendering a sprite as you turn. So and the more degrees that you turn. So I was thinking I was in one place and when I was actually not, and it would just kind of throw me off just a hair to where I would miss some items really easily.
That's interesting. I'm not sure I've ever noticed that for my own gameplay, but it makes a lot of sense that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
The only other real note I have on visuals, I think I kind of covered my general opinion pretty well. I said it's not the prettiest game, but it definitely does its job. Being an early N64 game and all. The only other note I have is actually a really, really oddly specific thing, and I think it's a good thing. And it's that a lot of sound effects in the game are accompanied by a written out onomatopoeia of the sound effect. So, for example, when you get hit with an item, I believe there's like a little explosion sprite that says kaboom on it, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Whenever you drift, this one's really obvious, but whenever you drift, a bunch of little E's are trailing from the cart, which is great. Whenever you press the R button to hop, it says boing with an exclamation point.
Oh, yeah, it does.
And this one might be my favorite. And well, there's one more, which is that when you spin out, like after you hit a banana, it goes whir, which is kind of cool. But my absolute favorite is that if you become airborne and you land, like you land hard, it says poomp, spelled Poomp with an exclamation point.
Poomp.
And like,
Oh
and I've noticed these things before, but last night when I was like kind of looking at everything a little more critically, I just noticed all these little onomatopoeia coming out everywhere, and I just thought it was great. Like it filled me with so much joy that I just had to write it down. I was like, this is awesome. It's just a nice little layer of polish that I think shows, the traditional Nintendo attention to detail. I think it's a fun little coating on a game, and it's something that it's a type of little detail that I would want to put into a game if I were making one.
Right. Yeah. No, I know it's there, but it's something that's just so easy to overlook, and it's actually kind of funny because I think, do any other Mario Kart games do that?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I kind of want to say no.
I kind of want to say no too, but it's actually quite hilarious that they do that. That they got away with that. Really, is ploomp. So funny, really. Kind of reminds me of a comic book almost.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I actually love that and didn't really take that into consideration.
Well, I'm happy to have shared my joy with you. That's what this podcast is all. That's what our friendship is all about. Really, it's about finding the little things in life that give us joy and sharing them with each other, and also the entire internet.
Ah, the touching Peter statement. Anyway, so you gave visuals a what?
I didn't say until now, but I give it a 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5, and so that would bring. Okay, yeah, no, I forget. You do it a little bit different.
Oh, did you give your entire aesthetics rating already? Was it the 90?
No, I gave my audio rating. My visual rating I thought would come after your visual rating. So actually, let me get into that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So pretty much, yeah, it doesn't wow me with graphics, but as you said, for its time, it wasn't too bad. I mean, they had textured grass in a 3D world. What more could you ask for?
Right.
But the 2D sprites in a 3D game kind of threw me off, like I said, with depth perception. I want to say some levels are pretty cool and some levels aren't. Rainbow Road is amazing. I do love a Rainbow Road.
I'm glad you reminded me. I meant to mention that.
Right. I think that's completely amazing. And I do love the onomatopoeias now that you mention it. It's a great point. I don't really have much more to say about the visuals other than that. I think it's okay. And so I gave it an okay rating of 84, which let me just go ahead and say that brings the audio to 90, visuals at 84. I like to average those together into one rating for aesthetics, which is a rating of 87.
Right. And so my average for the aesthetics would be a 4.5, which would be a 90, I believe.
Cool. It seems to be like, actually for both categories, we're like 3 off. So yours is like a 90 and mine is like a 87, and the one before you had 80, and mine was 83. So we're pretty on par with each other in terms of agreement.
We'll see if we'll keep on that streak with our next and final section of content.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and jump into this one.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of content, I thought, like I said earlier, some cool levels, some not so cool levels. Looking at you, Banshee Boardwalk. Now, I will say Banshee Boardwalk looked amazing, but it was by far the most frustrating. I want to say the special cup, honestly, and I know it's the last and final cup. It was just really hard, except for DK's jungle. I didn't find that one too challenging. But in terms of the levels, it was either hit or miss with me. I know a lot of people like Toad's Turnpike. I'm just not too big of a fan.
I'm a pretty big fan of it, actually.
Yeah. I also thought that the game kind of lacked a little bit of urgency when it comes to unlocking extra content. I mean, if you start from scratch and you want to unlock the levels and whatnot, I believe that's still a thing. I played with a complete game, so I guess that kind of hinders my view on that. But, from what Ryan said, he completed the game 100% and he got a different background on the start screen.
Right.
And so I'm like, really? Is that all you get? And I think you get all the characters from the start. So, I mean, it's just really I felt like they could do unlocking content a little bit better. And I didn't really find any, there's Grand Prix, there's playing with your friends, and there's battle. And, once you got above 2 players, it became less and less significant, I feel like. Except if you were to do battle, which it becomes more and more significant. However, the racing loses its value. So I just didn't find the entire body of content to be too amazing. However, as we've mentioned before, it is an early game for the Nintendo 64. So I will go ahead and give this... Well, do you want to talk about it first before I give my rating?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So I'm glad that you're ending on the unlockables note, because that was one of my main points. I don't know if you remember this, but over a year ago, I was somehow motivated over the summer to write a literal essay on Star Fox 64, which is one of my favorite games of all time, and how I wish that the unlockable content in that game were A, more extensive, and B, more proportional to the amount of effort that you have to put in to complete the game 100%. So I think that your comment, or more technically, Ryan's comment about completing the entire game 100% and getting a different title screen, that's kind of shitty. I would like to have maybe 1 or 2 extra characters. I think they probably could have managed that. I don't know who they would be. I mean, now it feels like they throw the entire kitchen sink into the Mario Kart character roster. Baby Rosalina, who the fuck? I also was playing with a complete game. I don't remember the last time. I haven't played on a complete Mario Kart 64 file, but I'm not even sure that you have to unlock the other cups. I think they all might be available from the start. Maybe not the special cup, but I don't remember having to earn most of the tracks, right? And you certainly don't have to earn any of the characters. They're all there already. But yeah, I think if there was, 1 extra cup, if they could manage that, that might be kind of nice.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty big fan of racing games in general, or at least I used to be, and I would have really enjoyed having some more meat to sink my teeth into in terms of tracks. The only other point that I really want to mention is that I am really, really, really upset, and always have been, that Mario Kart 64 does not have a quick race mode. That being a mode where you can just choose one track and race that track and be done with it.
Right.
If you're playing by yourself, which I often did because I actually didn't play too many video games with friends back then. Actually, side note, that's kind of a waste when you have Mario Kart 64. It's like the ultimate party game in many respects.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was playing a lot of single player Mario Kart 64 and every other Mario Kart game that I played. And in Mario Kart 64, if you want to race a particular track, too bad, you have to go through the entire Grand Prix up until that point, assuming you're trying to play a track that's not the first track. And it's that sucks because most, if not all of my favorite tracks are not the first track, so I have to work up to it. And when you get to that point, you might as well just complete the whole damn Grand Prix, which, isn't a big deal. It's just 4 tracks. It takes 15 minutes or less. I get it. But I just feel like that's a that's like something obvious, I would think.
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure it's something obvious because I felt this way about it before I had ever played a Mario Kart game that did have a quick race. So it's not like I was missing it. It's like I just knew instinctively that it had to be there and it wasn't.
Yeah,
And I was upset by it.
I think a lot of people would agree with you in that regard.
I feel kind of bad with my only 2 talking points for content being negatives. The quick race negative being way more for me than the unlockables one. I'm kind of interested that you were talking about certain levels in particular because that's like I certainly favor some tracks over others, but it didn't occur to me to consider that in the content category. So I think that's actually interesting, and that's something I might think about more when we do other games.
Right.
Because I do think that's a valid point. Like, you know, if you have all these tracks but only some of them are good, then wouldn't the content rating suffer? Like, I would think so.
Yeah, and the characters, and if you say there's not enough characters, that also takes into account.
Yeah, or if the characters, you know, didn't have enough variety or what have you.
Right.
I don't think that those problems really apply to this game. I do feel like most of the tracks are pretty strong. I have my favorites, but I think everyone does. I think that's kind of all that I feel about the content. I think we've kind of covered everything. Well, I guess I do want to give a quick shout out to the mirror mode.
Yeah.
Which in the game is just called Extra, I believe. And I think that is really fun. And you might have mentioned this, I think you did, but Toad's Turnpike, the highway level, the cars do turn around and face you and they drive into you rather than driving away from you on all the other default modes.
Yeah.
Which is really, really difficult. I remember like always struggling with it, but it was I think that was one of the most fun things about mirror mode. And I think that was probably the most fun unlockable in the entire game was like the way that one track was affected by mirror mode.
Yeah. It made my blood pressure rise for sure. I was like, it's so stressful. Yeah. So I guess we'll move on to the rating for the content category if you're all done with your side of things.
Sure. Why don't you give your rating first?
Okay, I gave it an 81. So yeah, I felt like it was good, satisfactory, not great, not horrible. I wouldn't say it's horrible because it had some good content. It made me want to play it and become different characters, play different levels, especially with my friends or family. So I would say the content's fair enough to give it an 81.
You know what? I might actually give this a different score than what I wrote down last night.
Okay.
I felt like I was being a little harsh last night when I sort of re-rated this game because I have rated it before. I'd originally written down a 3, which would equate to a 60. It might be the conversion from out of 5 to out of 100 that's tripping me up, but something about that just doesn't seem too right.
Right.
So I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4.
Okay.
4 on content. I think that for me, honestly, if there was a quick race feature, I would give it a 5. I think.
All right.
I think my expectations at first might have been a little too high because it is, you know, an early N64 game, which is not an excuse for a game to be bad, but it is an excuse for a game to be, you know, missing a couple little things here and there.
I agree. So averaging up all the totals, let's just run through the breakdown again. I had gameplay at 83, aesthetics, which combined visuals and audio together, at 87, and then content at 81. What were your ratings for each category again?
So converting mine to out of 100, it would be 80 for gameplay, 90 for aesthetics, and 80 for content.
Awesome. So that brought my overall score to 83.7, which I think is very in line with what I checked earlier, like before I replayed the game. It's very in line with Metacritic's score. So I was like, okay, wow, yeah. I guess I'm a pro critic.
Damn, look at you doing your research.
Yeah. Well, what did you get?
I got an 85.
Oh, we're pretty similar. I think we feel pretty similar on this game.
Could you remind me real quick what you just said was your overall average?
83.7.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Very close. Before we move on to the next segment, which is super amazing, and I love this segment, can we just say one character for each of us that we wish was in Mario Kart that isn't in all of the iterations of Mario Kart?
Oh.
One Nintendo character.
Any Nintendo character at all. Well, I guess they do have a Link and like villagers now, so
Yeah,
I guess literally any Nintendo character is fair game at this point.
right.
Do you want to start? I feel like
Yeah.
you have a more informed opinion on this.
I do, and I'm going to start with Kirby. Why the heck isn't Kirby in the freaking game?
Ooh.
Because Kirby is one of the staples of Nintendo, and you're just not going to put him in there, but you're going to put in the Splatoon characters? What? I don't understand that ideology at all.
I will say, in defense of that, in defense of the status quo, that is, Kirby has had, I believe, exactly one racing game, that being Kirby Air Ride for the GameCube.
Right.
So maybe they feel that he doesn't need to be in a racing game because he was in one like 15 years ago or whatever.
Okay.
So devil's advocate, maybe that's why he's not in the game. But I do feel like he would be a good fit for Mario Kart.
Right, I agree. But if that's the case, then I would if we're gonna say that okay, he can't be in it because he's had his own racing game. Well, yeah, I would say Ness. Why is it Ness in it?
Because Ness is not that popular, I guess.
Samus? I don't know.
Samus would be pretty funny in Mario.
All right, who would you put in there then?
Man. So
Oh, I know who it is.
I don't think you do, actually. I think this is going to surprise you.
It's Ridley.
No, it's not Ridley.
Okay.
That's a good idea, though. No, I was going to say Mr. Game & Watch.
Oh,
I feel like
actually,
Mr. Game & Watch would be great. Isn't Mr. Game & Watch like a sort of precursor to Mario? I kind of feel like he is. Actually, I'm gonna look this up real quick. I want to see what came first.
Chicken or the egg.
Super Mario Brothers or Game & Watch? I think Game & Watch came out first.
What's funny, you say that, but try putting Game & Watch into Mario Kart 8. Like, how do you make a 3D model of Game & Watch?
I was gonna say just make them flat like they do in Smash Brothers, but the issue is in Smash Brothers it's a side view, and in Mario Kart it's a view from the back, so you'd be looking at
Yeah, that's what I'm
looking
saying.
at a thin line.
That'd actually be the perfect line.
It would be the perfect line. Damn it, you just blew open a gigantic hole in my my desires.
I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? That just makes me want to see it more. I want to see the geniuses at Nintendo work their magic. I want to see how they're going to pull this off.
What if they did make Game & Watch 3D? Which they could do, but like, what if they did that? That would be groundbreaking.
What if they just like rebooted the entire Game & Watch franchise? And they had like, dude, what if they just fucking made like a Super Mario 64 but new and with Mr. Game & Watch, and it was like Game & Watch for the Nintendo Switch, because apparently that's how they name games now. Like,
Yeah.
you know, Mr. Game &
With the
Watch for
console
the
name.
Switch and for the Nintendo 3DS, DS XL, new, whatever they're called.
Yeah, I hear you.
So I think that was a good sort of closing thought. I do want to add one little micro thing. It's little and micro. But I do want to tell the listeners that as we record more episodes and rate more games, we will be comparing scores between different games. So what was the average for this one? Like an 81 or something like that?
84.35.
Ah, a nice round number. So now that Mario Kart 64 is at an 84.35217, we're going to see where the other games stack up. We're going to have a little leaderboard going. It might be on our website. Who knows?
Okay, I will say let's just round up. Let's just make it 1 decimal point, just so that you don't get too triggered. We'll say 84.4.
You're so considerate.
Because I actually had that issue on the overall score for mine. It was actually 83.6 repeating, and I just rounded it up to 83.7. So, that being said, let's make this 84.4.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So, 84.4. I feel that's pretty justifiable. That's a pretty good rating. I feel confident with that rating. And it's our first rating, so we'll only get better at this. Hopefully, we are not rating experts.
We are fans of ratings. We enjoy categorizing things.
Shout outs to our friends, the Yeasty Boys over at their podcast. If you want to check out their podcast, it's a great podcast where they rate beer and they talk about honestly funny and goofy things, and they're a really cool bunch. So go check them out if if you're feeling up to it. They're called the Yeasty Boys, and I think you can find them on Twitter at the Yeasty Cast, which we don't have a Twitter yet, but I plan to get that going real soon so that you can like tweet us questions and whatnot. And
I just can't wait for all of the fan mail to just pour in. Oh my God.
Yeah, I know, right? So we'll work on that. But how about we get into our next segment, which I'm super excited about, and I think you're going to like it.
I am really stoked. I cannot wait. That sounds sarcastic, but I'm being serious.
Yeah. That was the most monotone, like, I'm so excited. I cannot wait.
Well, I've always been monotone. My mom told me so.
My mom told me so. All right, well, if your mom told you so, then it must be true.
Yeah. So what do you have for me?
This next section is called Quick Attack. And what is going to happen is I'm going to basically ask you these sort of buy or sell questions on gaming news. It's going to be like, okay, did you hear about this? And I'm going to say along the lines of, okay, are you buying, are you selling this? But with a little twist, I'm going to change like buy or sell to a different kind of word each time that we do this segment. So
just to switch it up, just for fun.
Just to switch it up. Just to kind of throw different things at you. And I think you're going to like this week's words.
All right, lay it on me.
It's going to be cruising or bruising.
Oh, yeah. There's a great song. There's probably 5 great songs called Cruising for Bruising, so I'm stoked.
Yeah. And so I've got about like 5 different gaming news I'm going to throw at you, and you're going to say that you're either cruising or you're bruising these. And you're going to say cruising or bruising and maybe like a sentence or two explaining why. You're not going to go into too much elaborate details. So it's called Quick Attack, so we kind of wanted to keep the segment a little bit quick.
Right.
So let me know.
All right, I'm ready.
You're ready? You're ready? All right. Okay.
Yeah.
According to IGN, Apple iOS games that offer loot boxes are now required to disclose the odds of attaining randomized goods to consumers before purchase. Are you cruising or are you bruising?
Cruising. Fuck loot boxes.
Yeah, I know, right? All right, cruising. Well, that was awesome. Nice little solo act by P. Willie.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're moving on to our next question. Nintendo has brought back the Nintendo Power magazines of old into the form of a podcast. Are you cruising or are you bruising this?
Cruising, yeah. All right. So you sent me a text message to that effect last night, I think.
Yeah, I did.
Which, first of all, how dare they chomp our style?
Yeah, I know, right? They copied us.
We clearly started talking about video games before Nintendo Power ever did. But yeah, I got fond memories of Nintendo Power. I inherited some of my brother's magazines. Unfortunately, I don't have them anymore. But it's a great brand. It was a great magazine, and I think it'll make a great podcast. And I'm stoked.
Sick. All right, moving on to our next question. A new platformer game labeled Brawlout has just been released for Nintendo Switch, using inspirations from Super Smash Bros. Melee by incorporating things such as wave dashing and teching and all of that competitive nonsense. Are you cruising or are you bruising this fact?
I'm divided. Okay, I'm going to say bruising, and let me explain. So my first instinct was bruising. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because there are already, I'd say, a decent number of games by this point that are doing this. Although, to be fair, I think most of them are on the PC. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of them are on consoles, not Nintendo consoles, I don't think. You said this is coming out for the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like that because I feel like getting more people exposed to Melee-like fighting is a good thing. For listeners who don't know, Kevin and I are really big fans of Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo GameCube.
Not experts.
So on that level, I'm excited for this, but I feel like it's being done already, and I feel like, I don't know. It's only like 5 or 6 games that I know of, but I feel like that's already kind of saturated, which maybe is not the case. I feel like I've been talking too much for Quick Attack, but I'm going to say I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm going to round it down to bruising for the sake of variety.
All right. I want to add one quick point to that. I feel like Platform Fighter has only worked for Super Smash Bros. And perhaps that's only because it just included the fighters that we know and love, like Mario, Luigi, Pikachu, all that good stuff. Perhaps the only reason it worked is because of those characters. And if those characters were in a more traditional fighting style game, I mean, would it be still as popular as Super Smash Bros? I don't know, but you could argue that. Anyway, moving on to our next question. Fallout 4 VR was just recently released for PC. And are you cruising or are you bruising Fallout 4 VR? Like, you find that appealing?
I got the cruise control set on that one. I'm going like 70 on the highway.
Yeah, okay.
I will qualify by saying that I've never played a Fallout game, but I've seen you play Fallout 4, and I know that you're a fan of Fallout. And I'm excited for you, so I'm gonna be on your side. I'm gonna say I'm cruising. I imagine you're cruising for this news.
I am somewhat cruising. I haven't been the biggest fan of VR because I think, VR is the end of all things. Is like, when people start, well, eventually people will start like growing up into an augmented reality world, but I don't want to get into that. So I'll just say I'm cruising if I had to be a part of this segment, which I'm not. But yeah, I do like the idea of being immersed even more into the Fallout 4 world. Moving on to the next question. Breath of the Wild wins Game of the Year for 2017. Are you cruising or are you bruising?
Cruising, I'm really cruising. Yeah. I'm really cruising. This is the Zelda theme song, but you can't tell because I suck. But I'm cruising. I'm tempted to edit that out in post and redo it, but I'm gonna own up to my failures. Cruising, I'm really cruising. I'm really cruising. This is the Zelda theme song, but you can't tell because I suck. Quick aside, I have considered, and I'm not sure I've landed one way or the other on this yet, but I've considered getting a Switch just as a Breath of the Wild machine.
Ooh.
Because I've heard so much good about this game, and I feel like I'm missing out. I feel like I can only watch so many Let's Plays of things without actually playing them.
Yeah.
Also, getting a Switch would be the first new video game console I've gotten since the Wii in 2007. So
yeah,
it might be time, a decade later, it might be time for me to invest in some new gaming technology so I can play, so I can breathe in the wild.
Breathe in the wild. Yeah, I'm actually been itching to get a Switch as well. I just haven't been able to afford it, honestly. But I hope that one day we could both play a game on the Switch, perhaps Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I don't know, just throwing that out there. But yeah, I'm kind of cruising that fact as well. But that about wraps it up for today's episode. So we kind of, just a quick recap, we broke down Mario Kart 64 and I gave it an overall of 83.7. You gave it an overall of 85. That brought our average to an 84.4, if we're rounding things up for Peter's sake. And that places first among all of our games that we've rated, which is only just one. But, we're going to get better at this. And, we look to do more reviews of more games. We're really excited about this podcast. And I'm really looking forward to more games that we rate and more opinions and more in-depth analysis of this and having just a lot of fun bringing you this content. So I've had a lot of fun with today's episode, and I can't wait for more, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was nervous about recording this episode. I still kind of am. I'm nervous to listen back to it. Yeah. Although, for those who don't know, Kevin and I used to stream video gameplay on Twitch fairly often for a period of time. So we are kind of used to entertaining people. Again, we're not experts, but this podcast format is a new adventure for us, and we are excited. And I feel like this episode went pretty well. We'll leave you guys to be the judge of that. But we are excited. We've got more games in the lineup. Kevin and I have both played a lot of games, so we got a variety to choose from. So if you've never played Mario Kart 64, which, first of all, how? Second of all, we'll have something for you. These will probably mostly be older games, though.
Right.
Most of the games that both of us have played extensively have been older Nintendo games. I personally grew up in a Nintendo household, so that's kind of my perspective. But there's a lot of stuff to talk about there, so we look forward to bringing that content to you. Kevin, do we have an email address yet?
Not currently, but I will see about setting that up. It'll probably be something to the effect of, the Interstate Gamers at Gmail. I'm fairly certain that's not taken, but due to lack of professionalism and what I'm speaking right now, we will basically, what's probably going to happen is I'm going to create some social media, some Twitters, which is probably how you found out about this podcast, because I will link people to this social media site, which will probably be Twitter. And then we will link you to an email that we use for that Twitter. So stay tuned to the Twitter that you will most likely hear from us at.
Right.
In other episodes, we will actually give you the actual names in the actual podcast.
Right. It'll be great. We look forward to hopefully receiving, again, just mountains of fan mail from everyone. We really need it, because otherwise what's really the point of doing all this?
Right.
But yeah, once we get that stuff situated, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to email us or tweet us questions about games that we've reviewed or that we haven't reviewed, maybe, if you're feeling adventurous. Again, that does it for the show. I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in. You've been a great audience. Kevin, any last words? Are you ready to close this baby out?
Let's do it. Let's close it out.
All right. Hope you guys have a good day or night. We'll see you all at the next episode. And until next time.
Yeah, baby.
Thanks again for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time.